Well, good evening, everybody. This is the budget work session of the City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona, to be held May 5th, 2023. 2023? It's 22, right? Please tell me I didn't. Okay. I've lost a couple years. I didn't want to lose one more. 2022 at 5 p.m. at the Council Chambers Building, 826 North Main Street. Okay. Let's take the roll.
Councilmember Henry.
Here.
Councilmember Cura.
Present.
Councilmember Naren.
Here.
Councilmember Wilden.
Here.
Councilmember Hulse.
Here.
Councilmember Matthews is absent. Mayor Linsky.
Here. Councilmember Matthews is watching us, though, so just be warned, don't say anything bad about him, because he is watching. He's just a text away. All right, so just one item this evening, just one item. Presentation of the city's proposed fiscal year 2023 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So before we turn it over to our my esteemed colleague, Kirsten Lennon, our Financial Services Director, I just want to say we have presented to council, and you'll see tonight, a balanced budget that we believe hits all the strategic priorities of City Council. So I'm not going to, normally I'd like to say thank you and say a few things, but I think we'll just wait for the slideshow today. But the one thing I will ask is that this is meant to be a discussion. This is our draft budget. We will then bring back a tentative budget that will have your recommendations in it if we miss something. So please feel free to stop us, interrupt us, ask questions, give us feedback as we go along. There's a lot of slides and a lot of information, so feel free. This is for your and the community's benefit. So if we talk too fast, if we skip over something that you want to ask, please feel free to stop us at that point so that we can give you the information you need.
Great, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Kirsten Lennon, the Financial Services Director, and we are going to talk about the proposed 2023 budget. We've done a lot of work up to this point. We've brought you the goals, we've brought you the accomplishments from the current fiscal year, goals for next year. We've had a lot of meetings with department heads and with staff to kind of figure out what's needed for the coming year and to plan things out. First, we're going to talk about the economy. We're going to talk about inflation, and I always like to throw a little joke in there. The caption there is that it's the elephant in the room. We know inflation right now is really high. The current CPI is up 10.9% in February. We haven't seen this type of raise in CPI since the 70s. So this is a huge jump in inflation. Things are costing more. And if you look at the graph there, you can see that it's been pretty steady until recently. And then it's just risen at an alarming rate. So over the year, the index fell for all items except less food and energy rose at 9.9%. So food and energy both rose at 9.9%. Used cars and trucks at 38.5%. And then shelter and recreation both at 12%. So costs are just increasing for everything. So that leads us into unemployment. So you can see on this graph, we've shown you this graph several times. It just kind of shows you we had that little spike, and then now we're down in February. Yavapai County is at a 3% unemployment currently in February. That's really low. The city currently has several positions open and are advertising for 4 transit drivers, 3 communication specialists, 4 firefighters, arsenic specialists, water operations. Several jobs are out there, and we're having a hard time filling those positions because unemployment is low, so no one's really looking for a job right now. So the state shared revenues is one of our major revenues that come in, and we get these numbers from the state. They haven't passed their budget yet, so they gave us sort of a proposal of what they would be giving us for the next year, and everything has increased. If you look at the chart there, you can see state sales tax is supposed to increase. The urban revenue share is expected to increase by 46%. So that's income tax from 2 years ago. So the total value of the urban revenue share for the state is up 46% 2 years ago. And so that's what we get, and that's like they give you a number and that's what you get for the year. So it's an actual number. The motor vehicle in lieu tax is up for next year, and so are the HERF taxes. Everything is increasing. These increases are from 9 to 46%. Those are some large increases in the state shared revenues that we will receive for next year. Our population numbers actually went down in the census. I'm not sure if that was due to COVID or they went down to 12,029. I think they had estimated us about 12,200. Not a huge number, but it went down. And I think that was because they did the census during COVID and a lot of people didn't respond.
Kirsten, if I can add one thing to that.
Always.
I believe that you've already received some updated numbers, and so the revenue is actually even greater than presented to council right now by about $500,000, if I remember.
The number that is in the budget document currently for urban revenue share is about 600,000 less than what's on this chart, because I didn't change it when we got the numbers and I'd already put the number in there. We are going to update that number for the tentative budget. I just didn't want to you have to maneuver a whole bunch of stuff in the budget to make it all balance out in the end. And at the time I got it, I had already balanced the budget and I didn't want to add that in, but we will be adding it for the tentative. I put in at 1.5 million, and you'll find that in that very large budget document that was attached in the communication. And it actually is coming in at 2.6, I think is what it is. It's really small, I can't read it. Oh, where is it? 23, 2.3, sorry. So we will update those numbers for the tentative budget, and I was quite shocked. I actually put my estimates in. I was pretty close on everything but that number. I was quite a ways off for that number. Our city sales tax. We have seen an increase in our city sales tax the last several years. As you can remember, in 2020 when we were doing our budget during the COVID times, we had estimated our sales tax would be way down, and we had budgeted at 16 million, and it ended up actually being 17% over the previous year. So that growth is part of why our fund balance and our carryover is much larger moving into future years, because we had also cut expenses. So then we didn't spend that increase. It went into reserves. We're estimating that this year we will end up 10% above last year, and then estimating next year at a growth of 7%. And when I was doing my budget, I am really conservative, and it kind of scares me to give you these numbers. But I contacted Sedona and Camp Verde, and they are both projecting at least a 7% increase for next year. Matter of fact, Sedona is anticipating a 21% increase this year and an 8% next year. So we're right in line with what our neighbors are seeing and what they're doing for their budgets. And if you look at this graph, you can also see that it's increased. It's basically doubled since the beginning, whatever year that is. I can't remember, can't see it.
2014.
Thank you. That's why I don't put them in there, so you can.
So I see some council members squinting. So in 2014, it was a little over 12 million, and we're projecting 25 million for next year.
And that is partially due to the fact that we have had an increase in businesses. I mean, we've gotten a new Dunkin' Donuts, a new Starbucks, there have been, and Dutch Brothers and other businesses that have moved into town, which increases our tax base. So just to kind of give you an idea of how we budget and then what actually happens. Actual sales tax is the blue, and then the budgeted estimates are the orange. So we pretty typically try to estimate a little lower than what actually comes in. It's always better to budget that way, to know that we're covered no matter what. And if things come in a little bit lower, then we know we're covered. And we've done really good, except for if you look at 21, we budgeted really low, and they came in really high. And that was due to, again, to COVID. We had cut back on that sales tax numbers, thinking that the shutdown would cause our sales tax to come in lower. So bed tax, utility tax, and the 1% construction sales tax. We allocate 1% of the construction sales tax to the streets department, and it gets put over there every year. Helps with all the streets projects and all the HERF projects. You can see that in this chart that bed tax has also grown for the last 4 years, estimating that next year we will bring in about $550,000 in bed tax, of which part of that allocation goes towards tourism and marketing in the economic development budget, and then some of it goes to the chamber to help with the visitor center down here in Old Town. Utility tax has also increased. It's kind of cutting off the numbers over there on the side. I don't know where they are. But you can look at the breakdown of our sales tax, and you can see that retail sales and food for home consumption are our two highest tax brackets. They bring in almost 73% of our total tax collections. I'm waiting for somebody to ask a question. So our water and wastewater rates, which fund our two enterprise funds, water and our wastewater, you approved to have those rates increase a few years ago for a total of 5 years. We're supposed to have a rate increase at July 1st. That is in the budget for the wastewater. We are recommending not increasing it for the water and leaving it the same and skipping a year and seeing how things are next year and if it's needed at that time. We currently have reserves in the water department that will cover any expenses, and we just wanted to basically allow that to have a year off before on that increase to customers. The wastewater rates will increase, and that's because we're still trying to fund the all the renovations up at the Mingus treatment plant.
And did water loan money to wastewater? Did that happen, or did we loan money from the general fund? How did that happen?
We loaned money from the general fund to wastewater when we were building the plant at Riverfront. So I have the estimated revenues up there for the 2 years. Basically, that FY23 will remain the same for water, relatively based on a little bit of whatever the seasons hold for that use, and then wastewater is a substantial increase due to that increase in the rate. So our fund balances, we talk about this, our carryover and our fund balances, and when we did our audit and they came in and they told you, well, we increased our fund balance by 12 million over the citywide, and that was because we budgeted our expenses lower and our revenues came in higher. So we had all that money to carry over. So you can kind of see the growth over the years. In 2018, we had spent a lot of our fund balance down. It was 15 million in 17 and down to 5 million in 18. And most of that was for the treatment plant. And then we've steadily been increasing that fund balance and that carryover since then. We will be spending a little bit of it next year, and that's partially due to some construction and some transfers to different funds for projects.
Kirsten, you have a zero there. We've never seen a zero. So for this year estimate on the capital project fund, can you explain why that's zero?
We bought a building. So it increases next year, but we use that carryover fund balance to purchase the building. And it'll increase next year as we transfer money in at the end of this year for that CIP, the replacement fund that we decided as a reserve in the budget last year. We'll put money over into the CIP fund, and then we'll add more this year as part of a reserve as well.
Do we happen to have a cap on reserves or a goal or anything like that, or just sky high?
Well, it was used to be 16.67% of whatever our prior year revenue is, and that's ongoing revenue. That doesn't include one-time revenues, grants, or those types of things. But this last year, we did a 25% reserve and tried and increased it to make sure that reserve would be higher for future years. And it's 25% in this budget as well, moving forward.
So if I can add, so that's our designated reserve, that's our safety number, and that's the 25% that goes up. She'll show you those numbers in a little bit. The undesignated reserves that we're putting in council's budget this year are in the council's budget for next year. There's no goal or estimate for that. It's, what you guys feel comfortable with. And we really haven't needed to spend that. So you'll see when she gets into talking about some of our expenditures, we plan to spend a lot of money next year on projects, parks and rec, infrastructure. You'll see that even after doing all that, after replacing the money we spent on the building that we bought this year, we still are adding to our reserves. So we're clearly spending less than we're bringing in. But do we have a goal for that extra? No, we believe that we need to spend it judiciously, and we need to spend it on an infrastructure and things that make our community better. I'll just, as a heads up before she gets to that slide, if you want us to spend even more, we can, but I'll have to hire a couple more people. This budget project list, the CIP list, is about the max of what our staff can currently produce and as an output. But if you wanted a couple more road projects for a few more $1 million, at some point we'll have to start adding some staff. But I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
It does. Are we done with CARES Act? Is that done?
So the savings that we had from the CARES Act, we allocated a lot of that towards the housing, the $400,000 for the down payment assistant program. We also allocated some money in this budget for any type of help we might give to developers that come in that need a loan or want us to subsidize something to help keep those the rent down. And then we budgeted for the portion that we have to pay for the housing manager.
So we basically took the CARES money and created a housing budget for that, for the council to direct us for future. And then for ARPA funds, which you're probably also curious about, we moved that into the wastewater fund. So it is not in any of the other reserves you see. We moved it into that fund, and when we talk about CIP, that's to make sure we can cover the projected need for our improvements.
So here's the budget. We had budgeted for this current fiscal year, our budget was $120,593,060. Partially that was so high because of the bonding for PSPRS. That was $20 million. We didn't do that in this year, we did it in 21, but we had to budget for it in case it rolled over, and we needed to do it, so we had the budget authority. So we are anticipating that the actuals will be at like 100 million instead of 120 million. And a lot of that is carryover in reserves. That's the fund balance being put into the budget and the reserves being put into the budget to carry over into the next year. And the next fiscal year, we're anticipating the budget to be 139,316,000. Got to do the 785. And again, that's high. That is not normal for us. It's been around the 70, 80 range for many years, but we have a lot of carryover in reserves. So it makes the number higher because you budget both a revenue and expense for those. Also, there's bonding budgeted in next year to do the remodel and the construction on the new city hall. It being there does not mean that it's approved now, it just means that now we have the budget authority. So if we need to do it, we can do it. So also included in this budget is any reserves that we wanted to set aside, the 25%, the $1 million we do every year, the undesignated, the CIP reserve. Also included is all the capital that we are going to budget currently, unless you direct us otherwise. And then new personnel, a COLA, a merit, and then some new programs, and then an increase in our health insurance cost, which the city elected to, in this budget, we elected to cover the increase of the employee portion. So they are going to pay the same amount next year that they're paying this year for health insurance.
And Kirsten, there's more details at the end of the presentation, so you can direct us otherwise if need be.
There's lots of details. There's 30 slides. So this is the general fund. The general fund is currently budgeted at $49,797,000. And as you can see, the bulk of that is general services, which includes council, which includes those reserves. So that's why it's so high. Council's budget is 18 million, but basically almost that whole 18 million is reserves. And then the next highest would probably be public safety. And in this budget includes the carryover for the ladder truck, because you purchase it in 1 year, but they don't give it to you for a year and a half. And then some other capital items that they requested. And all the capital personnel changes are all included in this 49 million that you will see in a minute. So I just wanted to break out the special revenue funds, and we don't usually talk about these as much. They're not big dollar values, but we are moving quite a bit of money over into the streets department to do some road projects. And I just kind of wanted to show that as part of the budget, because we will be moving $4 million over as a reserve for future road projects for the HERF fund. The next biggest is our CATS department, and there's a lot of capital in there that we hope we get from ADOT. If it's not approved, then we will apply for another ADOT grant, and if that's not approved, we probably will not purchase those buses. It's quite a bit of buses to replace our fleet. Some of our fleet. 5, right? 6? So operating transfers. As you know, the library does not support itself. We get about $160,000 from the county, and the rest is funded by the general fund. And the budget for the library is 1.3 million. So we transfer in around 900,000 to $1 million every year to cover the expenses at the library. The airport fund, their budget is going to be about 400,000, and they bring in about 150,000 in revenues. And so the general fund will be covering 250,000 of their expenses. And part of the airport is that we transfer out our matching funds from the airport to the grant fund for any of those grants that we have in the budget, which they are listed in the capital. And there are, I think, 4 or 5 projects in the airport grant fund for next year. The cemetery budget is 430,000, and that's for the water line improvement that was supposed to be affluent, that may be not happening, but it's budgeted. I think they probably need to do some water line improvements anyway, even if they can't use it. And then the HERF fund, like I said earlier, I transferred 4.8 million in fiscal year 22 to have that reserve for 23 to be able to fund any projects. And we're thinking Main Street from Walgreens to, what is that place, Fox? To Clarkdale, to the edge of town, and get that road up, upgraded so that it matches hopefully the rest of 89A through town.
So if I can add just a couple of small items. All right, first question, Kirsten, does this include CIP costs for like the library?
Yes.
So one of the reasons the library budget's a little bigger, you'll see on the CIP list, there's a couple of projects that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Personnel, he wants new bathrooms or something over there, I guess. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So that's why it's a little bigger. Same thing with the airport. Significant number of CIP projects, several of them free, and we'll talk about those in detail as well. The fencing is 100% paid for. And then we have matching, big dollars for little matching dollars going in there. And again, same thing with, as she said, for transit. If we don't get the funding, which is either free or like 5%-ish, we won't be getting it.
It's usually 80-20 or 90-10.
90-10. I like 5 better.
It sounds nicer.
It does. So stay tuned there. So even those numbers, a lot of that's not general fund dollars being used.
So some budget changes and highlights, just some items that we added in this year's budget that haven't been there before. Ron thinks we need professional headshots.
So if I can add, this is part of the project to improve our website. We haven't forgotten. As a matter of fact, I got an update from John the other day. We're moving forward with our website improvements. And some of you have or have not reluctantly provided a professional shot of yourselves for our webpage. Mayor's favorite part of the job is getting his picture taken. And same thing with some of my staff. And so to up the professionalism of our website, we're going to bring someone and take some good pictures.
And I'm not going to read them all. Of course, community development has their master plan starting, and then that means more staff time for the master plan. Engineering has some stormwater management things that are going to be required next year that aren't currently required. Economic development, we're increasing the direct marketing budget to $340,000. It was $200,000 this year, so she's getting a $140,000 increase for next year and has a very detailed plan on how she plans on spending that. And then, of course, we're funding the chamber. We are doing the tuition reimbursement program that we did this year, next year, to make sure we're helping all of our employees. And then the fire department, they are getting the remainder of their ladder truck, and we're going to plan on purchasing another truck at $700,000 or $800,000 to replace an older engine that is requiring a lot of maintenance. The housing program, and then the presumptive cancer insurance started last year, or this year, current fiscal year, and that is a state mandated cost we have to pay into presumptive cancer policy for all firefighters, police officers too, I think. And then a referral program to help with recruitment. So the Parks and Recreation, we fully funded most of their events that they requested, TVR, a wine festival, Old Town Music in the Market. We also have funds in there to fix the slide at the Recreation Center, to update it and upgrade it so it looks nice and new again. And then to install a splash pad at a park. A park. I'm not sure what park yet.
Well, we're leaning towards Garrison Park right now, but we do have the funds available to do that. If it pleases council, we'll bring it back. If the budget goes through, we'll bring it back, the actual project and the details and those kinds of things. But we were able to fund that. And if I can back up, because bed tax is usually the question I get the most about. So in addition to the money that we provided directly in economic development tourism budget, the $340, there's another, I believe, $30,000 in our marketing that is more for material, tchotchkes, and fees or donations that people ask for, just those miscellaneous things. And then in our Parks and Recs budget, all those line items, TBR, Walking on Main, they now have a marketing line. So instead of being connected to revenue or some other thing, we've allocated a specific dollar in there for marketing to really account for our bed tax dollars being used. So that's kind of a change in philosophy, where before we just kind of did with what we had, and we're going to give Jack a more definite number to use in his marketing strategy.
So we're funding the 2 police officers that we didn't fund this year. Oh, they're filled. Well, one's not filled, right?
Well, they're all filled, but we're waiting for the last one to start. I believe he has not started yet, but all of those positions are filled. Remember, you authorized the positions last year, but we did not fund it. We did not move money into the police department's budget. This year, they're all fully funded.
And then streets, an additional $750,000 in pavement preservation, and that's a big thing. We have always done $750,000 every other year for pavement preservation, and we did it this year, and we're also going to fund it for next year as well. So we'll have 3 years in a row of pavement preservation.
So if I can add, so David or James will be back to you as soon as the budget's approved to make sure that we can continue down that list that you guys have already seen about neighborhood improvements and our road improvements. I do want to back up again about parks because I really believe that this budget invests in infrastructure, both in streets, sidewalks, and in our parks. Just so the community is aware, if this council approves this budget as presented, we have funded the design for the green space at Riverfront Park. So next to the dog park, next to the community garden, there's no plans to move the community garden. I repeat, there are currently no plans to move the community garden. Correct, Mr. Teal? All right. But we will eventually move the dog park, and then the plan is to create a green multi-use field, not dedicated to one sport, but one that can be used for multiple sports, lighting, a parking lot, all those good things that go for a great green space, possibly a playground over there. So the design, that's over $200,000 we're putting into that design. It will be very expensive to build. The turf alone, given the area and the ground, is going to be expensive to get ready. In addition, we have funded the design and the build of the rest of Riverfront Trail. So last year we inserted or built the trail that goes from about 10th Street into Old Town, connects to the jail trail. We will finish that connection point that will go from 10th Street around to the jail trail on the other side. So it'll be the completion of that. In addition to the pools at the rec center, we're also spending some money on refurbishing. It's over 15 years old now. It needs a little TLC, including a new filter, so that we can the next year clean the inside of the pool that has a lot of buildup because of the way it operates. So we're doing some behind the scenes maintenance at the rec center that then will be completed the following year. So again, in addition to the splash pad, which was the #1 request when they did the Parks Master Plan study. So lots of investment into our parks. So then as she said, I just want to say it again because I think it's a real big deal. We can afford to do another year of pavement preservation. So continue to improve our streets. And then I'll let her continue. We got more sidewalks and stuff.
We're also budgeting the typical, we always do the $100,000 for sidewalks every year, and then we are going to allocate again the, out of the half-cent sales tax increase, we had allocated money to pay off the pension, and it's about $350,000 yearly, but we paid off the pension, so we've been using it on sidewalks, and we're moving that over to pay for an additional sidewalk as well. And then, as it says up there, and as I said earlier, we're moving $4 million over to help fund, hopefully, the project of doing Main Street. Water and wastewater. Water is doing more arsenic replacement. They've started doing all the equipment at the different well sites. And then wastewater is going to do an injection well, and obviously the major upgrade at the Mingus plant. And currently in the budget, it's about $7 million to do the upgrades there, of which $4 million is funded by ARPA funds.
So if I can add back to the streets, with that $4 million set aside in its own reserve, we can begin the construction process of some part of Main Street as soon as it's designed. So we did receive our bids back for the design work. Staff is working through that. So we're beginning the process right now. So, you know, before we know it, we'll award the design bid, and then we'll begin designing the rebuild of Main Street between the two cities. And by setting this aside, we may not be able to do the whole thing next year, but we'll be able to actually start the construction of our portion of Main Street, I'm hoping, before the end of the next fiscal year.
Now, on that design, are we considering any way to tie in the arts, culture, and entertainment district elements into the design of the street, like we did here in Old Town with the nice lamps, street lamps and all that? Are we thinking of doing anything like that?
We did not at this point, but we could look at that. We're still early in the process. It wouldn't be a change order kind of thing. I can tell you what we've done is calming design. So some of the David was updating me today. Some of the ideas presented, even in just the RFP responses, included neat ways to reduce the speed through Old Town and other places. You're going to get a kick out of this. He told me one of the designs that people talked about was kind of a roundabout sort of thing at the other end of Old Town. Someone asked me about that recently. So I thought it was funny that David had brought that up. But there's a lot of calming devices put in there. So we can look at adding lighting or other things as needed. We can talk about that as it moves forward. But no design yet. And, of course, council would be approving anything before we move forward. You said speed bumps work much better? Hey, team, did you hear that? Speed bumps work much better than roundabouts. Oh, never mind. We'll talk offline.
So a few years ago, almost 5 now, we got into a contract with Enterprise Fleet, and we're leasing our fleet vehicles. And at that time, we leased 37 vehicles. And most of those were our police units that you see on the bottom corner. And that lease will be up at the end of, sometime in calendar year 23. So with the vehicle shortage right now, we actually ordered 8, 10 vehicles this year to add to our fleet in the lease program and have received none of them. They can't get them. They ordered them and then they got canceled, and then they ordered them again and then they got canceled. So we're still ordering them and hoping they come in next year. So we're actually going to go ahead and order replacements for those vehicles now, so that hopefully they actually do come in sometime in 23 or 24. Because most of the police units that we have, due to maintenance, wear and tear, it's best to just replace them. And part of that program is that they take them back, they strip them down, and they sell them for us. And then we get that money to apply back to our lease balance. And they can do a much better job at selling them than we do. On our public surplus site, we get very little money for vehicles that we sell, but they all sell it in the market with the rest of their vehicles. So, you can always buy Enterprise lease vehicles off their website. So they'll sell those vehicles for us and get a better price.
Is Enterprise a part of a GSA contract, or does that even come in?
What contract was that?
That was the tips, wasn't it?
Tips, yeah, it was tips. Yeah, and so we plan on doing 30 of the 37 vehicles we bought 5 years ago. One admin vehicle and the rest are mostly the police vehicles. It was quite funny. We have 2 vans at the youth center, the Ford Transit vans, the little ones that haul the kids around. She told me we could sell them for more than we paid for them. But you can't replace them. So if we want to have those vans, we have to keep them. And they only have like 3,000 miles on them each. So we're like, we'll just keep them. They're not, when you need it, but they don't get very much mileage. So reserves and the half-cent sales tax. We talk about this every year. In fiscal year 2022, we created our reserves. We did the 25% of the previous year's revenues, and that was $5.7 million. And we added the CIP reserve, or the replacement reserve, of $634,000. We did a general fund reserve of $446,000. We did the accumulation fund, which has been there forever, at $1 million. It had grown to 1.5. We used the $500,000 to help purchase the beginning of the fire truck, the ladder truck. And then we had undesignated reserves of $4.6 million. And then we had set money aside for our compensation study at $780,000. For fiscal year 23, our reserves are going to be at $17 million. This is after we've paid for capital that's in the budget, any salary increases, COLA merit, any personnel. We are setting aside as the 25%, $7.3 million. And then the CIP at $803,000 and undesignated at $8.5 million. And then the accumulation at $1 million. And this is also with transferring $4.8 million to the streets department to help with that construction of Main Street. So because we've been so good at not overspending our revenues and making sure that our expenses were lower than our revenues coming in, our reserves are growing. And so that's why these numbers are so much higher. So the half-cent sales tax allocation, we put $860,000 this year to streets, some money for transit, just a general fund reserve that was part of those reserves in the undesignated. We put money towards sidewalks. We put money towards the CIP program, and then the general fund, and then we plan on doing the same thing for next year. And then as you can see, that $368,000 is for sidewalks, and we'll go to the HERF fund and help fund those sidewalks. Any questions? So I always try to give you like here's really the expenses and here's really the revenues, because you see all that huge $139 million and it seems like so much. But really a lot of it is reserves and carryover, grant funds that come in that we don't spend them if we don't get the grant funds. You can see that we have $4.9 million in the current year for grant funds and revenues and expenses. Same thing for next year. We have $8 million because we have larger grant funding coming in for different projects. It's just kind of a, just want to give you an idea that shows really we're not spending $139 million. We don't bring in that revenue. A lot of those, the numbers that cause those to increase are the carryovers, the indirect costing, the costs from fund to fund, the interfund transfers. Those all make that value seem really high. So the priorities in our budget are always to cover all operational costs, which is why we meet with all departments and get their operational budget before we put anything else in the budget. Cover any salary increases or any personnel, and develop a budget with additional carryover to fund capital. We don't want to increase debt if we can avoid it. So if we can pay for one-time items like a ladder truck at $1.5 million, and then this year another truck with our carryover funds and our cash, we will. And then accomplish all the items from the strategic plan. I'm not sure we can accomplish them all right away, but we'll try. So when I was creating the budget this year, I made sure to really make sure that that was true. Let's put in operational costs, let's put in the revenues as we see them, and make sure there's still a carryover at the end. And there was. Both years I had a little over $3 million of carryover, even with adding capital, with changing salaries, with adding personnel. So our ongoing revenues will cover our ongoing expenses.
By over $3 million each
By
year.
over $3 million.
That doesn't include the grants though, right?
No, does not include grant funds.
Very important that we counted on reoccurring revenues and then those reoccurring expenses that we have to pay. Grants are optional, CIP things are optional, those kinds of things. This is really things that we have to pay the bills and the revenue we can expect. So at $3 million, if we have a slight downturn in sales tax, we should be able to absorb that with that $3.5 million. Of course, we still have significant reserves if it went on for several years, but again, if we went down $2 million and kept everything the same, and I don't do that, we'd still have $1 million extra and be $3 million ahead the next year. So it's a pretty good place to be in. We're not close, in my opinion. I think it's a very balanced, structurally balanced budget.
So personnel changes, this is when we get into the meat of the changes. Our current plan is to budget, and is budgeted in this budget, a 6% cost of living adjustment. We will only be moving the ranges 3%, because some people are at the cap or at the top of their range, and we want to make sure they get something. So we're going to move the ranges up 3% so they can get a 3% COLA, and then everyone else will get a 6%, which will move them up in their range and help with hiring people, because currently we have an issue where we hire and they're making the same as somebody who's been here for 3 years, because we're hiring at the minimum, and they still make the minimum because we've moved the ranges up every year. We also have in this budget a merit program where we are going to, if you are passing your review and you get a good review and you're not on a performance plan, on your anniversary date, you will get a 2% increase if you have been here from 0 to 5 years, which again, we're trying to reward people who stay on board, move them up in the scale so that we don't have that compression when we hire people in. And then if you've been here from I put points in there because, you know, if you've been here 5 years and 1 month, at June 30th, you're gonna get it. 5 to 10 years, you're gonna get a 3%. And then if you've been here over 10 years, you're gonna get a 4%. So basically there are people who have been here for a long time who might end up with a 10% raise. But if you look at the numbers, the majority of our people are below the 5-year mark. We have 119 employees who are below the 5-year mark. And then we have 37 in the 5 to 10 year mark, and we have 64 employees over 10 years. And this is all in the budget currently and funded. So we also plan on increasing our part-time wages by 6%, rounding. We hate like pennies and fractions of a cent. Everybody will go up $1 or $2 based on what they're making. And that's just to make sure that we're keeping up with the state minimum wage increases, because they will increase in January, and they've been doing it based on a cost of living adjustment or CPI, and I estimate that it's going to be at least 6%. It's probably going to be more like 8 or 10 because of inflation, and we will still be above minimum wage with the 6% increase if they did an 8% increase.
How many part-time employees do we have in the
It
city?
varies, but I would say probably 50 to 100. It depends on the time of year and what's going on.
I read the other day that Arizona is one of the highest, if not the highest, for inflation. So this goes without saying.
So we just kind of wanted to highlight what we've done for the last 5 years in compensation, and then also on this chart you can see staffing, full-time equivalents, and what departments and our total number of staff. You can read down the slide. We've only had, in the time I've been here, 21 years, we've only had 1 year where we didn't get anything as a raise or a COLA. So that's pretty good for a city that you didn't have 1 year out of 21 that you didn't get a raise. We've always tried to make sure our employees are compensated fairly.
So as I looked at this slide, I was not very happy with it because it showed that my first budget, we increased by 4 positions. And I was like, I know I did not improve 4 positions, but they were all transit drivers. We went from part-time to full-time, and we added transit drivers, which we only...
Wastewater and water too, I think.
And waste to get to the half. So you... special funds, not the general fund. So we reduced the general fund positions my first couple of years, but you have to dive into the details to get that. And again, transit's paid for, employees are paid for it. I'm gonna have to say 80% now. Is that the number?
80-20 or 58-40 something. Depends on which, if they're admin or operations. So I'm particular. It's my job to be particular. It's all about the details. So if you look at the numbers, we are planning on adding staff next year. There's currently 11 new positions in the budget. I know it's super, super tiny. You also have the same page as part of the communication, much bigger, so you can actually look at it. We are adding 11 positions and reclassifying 4 positions. One of the positions, we always like to highlight this, the records clerk position. They've asked for this position for how many years? Like 20 years? Forever. Yeah, they've been asking for a new records clerk forever, and we're finally going to be able to fund it and know that that's going to help them out tremendously. They are, working as much as they can, but they can't keep up with all the full staffing of officers and additional officers. It just makes for more reporting.
Ms. Lennon,
Yes.
in the CAT, the Verde Shuttle, the 2 additional positions, are those admin or operations?
They're operations.
And then what is the .25, that quarter position at the airport?
We have somebody, we have a person that's kind of a roving position. She helps out, they help out with reservations at all the facilities, and then they also help at the airport with some administrative functions. So we kind of split one person between 3 different departments. Partially they're in Parks and Rec, partially they're in economic development, I think, and then I think, and then partially they're at the airport.
So part of the reason for this position, we had Lorinda who worked with us for a little while, and she covered, helped out our airport manager with reservations and security stickers and lease assignments and some different things. So when she resigned and we hired someone else, she's still working in Parks and Rec. She's our reservations clerk over there. But she'll be shortly working with Jeff at the airport. One of the keys is she works weekends, and so our thought was it provides another access point on the weekends for people using the airport. It's one of those places that you use 7 days a week. So she'll be able to help answer questions, answer the phone, or provide gate access and those kinds of things for the airport. And hopefully someday help Jeff.
I think her title was actually changed to customer service for
Correct.
that purpose, so that we could have her be the customer service at the airport along with Jeff.
And she works out of the hangar there, or up from the airport?
Currently, she works in Parks and Rec, doing most of the reservations, but the thought is, yes, she could end up at the terminal up there with Jeff on the weekends or Fridays.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just for clarification in there, I think I've told most of council, but the management analyst is economic development. So the thought is when we hire that person, hopefully preferring bilingual to help that part of our community is my goal. It'll be listed there. And then local retention and recruitment of small businesses is really a key, freeing up some more time for Tricia to be able to work on tourism. The other thing, though, is to help Steve and I periodically. So, for example, we do a lot of land stuff, whether it's easement stuff or acquisitions or selling or trying to figure out. The thought is the person may be able to help our office a little bit with that. So we wanted a more generic term, very common in city managers' offices to have a management analyst, but someone a little more well-rounded. But the person's main functions will be economic development.
And the stormwater specialist is due to those mandates that we were talking about earlier in their budget. They are gonna have to do things that they aren't currently doing to make sure they're doing their stormwater management.
Including responding to do measurements during the storm activity. James said he could do it, but he didn't really, wouldn't be the thing that he'd mostly want to do, get out there in the middle of the washes and collect that stuff. But he says whatever the team requires. So we thought would help him out with this position. No, really, it's one of the areas that we lack. Same thing with, in my opinion, risk management and safety position that we're requesting for HR. Those are 2 strong areas that get done when we have time and haven't received the attention that I think that they need. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to make an impact in those 2 areas with those 2 positions.
And I had a question about that. Are we maximizing any resources available through the risk pool? I'm assuming we are, but we don't really hear too much about that.
Yeah, so we use them, Amanda uses them a whole lot, mostly for answering questions and helping us guide us. We also use our attorneys periodically when we need to for the different cases. One of the main functions that this person will be doing is COI, Certificates of Insurances. So given the number of events we have and the number of people that use our facilities, it takes a lot of work to make sure that they all have the proper insurance. We do not skip on that, and it's very time consuming. So this person would be responsible for making sure that we have all of our COIs. The other thing is safety. We have a safety program, but in my opinion, it's not at the level it should be. So whether that's helping the utilities and public works departments, transit with their tailgate meetings on safety, or whether it's driving around and checking on work sites. There's lots of things that don't get done now that I would like to be able to start implementing. I think with a good safety program, we can see a reduction in small accidents. You know, we have lots of little things that happen that cost us money, or the pool money. But yes, long answer for your question, yes, ma'am, we utilize that a lot.
I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I thought we had purchased software to help track the COIs some years back. Springbrook or something similar, I thought was going to do that for us.
Springbrook doesn't track COIs. I don't know if we
We-
have another
we-
software.
No, Amanda can come up, but we were using, or going to use a program by the risk pool that was supposed to help manage some of that, so I'll let her explain.
Yes, actually AMRP did purchase a program, Origami Risk, and we have access to use that for free. So it is a database. It should automate some of the system, like notifying people when they need renewed COIs in our system. Part of the issue, we are trying to roll that out, but we don't have quite enough staff time to even completely devote enough time to that we need to make it more effective and efficient for us.
And that makes perfect sense, so I appreciate that explanation, thanks.
Sure.
And will hiring this position help our insurance rates at all?
Hopefully.
Mr. Mayor, great question. Long-term, the goal would be yes. Again, drive around periodically and I see someone without their seatbelt on. It's one of my pet peeves. I'm like, ah. And so that's the kind of thing the safety person would be able to help with. And I believe that it would help in the long term. And workers' comp injuries is probably where I would see the biggest impact. If they were able to start a good safety program, and my guys in the back are probably laughing at me, but they stretching programs before the guys start working in the field has shown to reduce the number of injuries and those kinds of things. So having a safety person to help implement those programs would be very helpful and hopefully in the long term reduce claim cost.
Additional safety trainings and things as well, because, if you have a safety training, you're less likely to have that accident.
Okay.
So,
So
and then
nothing
our
immediate,
rates
but-
are based on our.
Got it. Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
So employee benefits, we just wanted to highlight some of the things that we give to an offer for our employees. We do a recreation center membership for all employees, full-time and part-time. It is a taxable benefit, which I know people get a little frustrated with me on that one, but it's not a very high tax. It's only $1 or $2. We match all retirement contributions for ASRS and public safety. We have a tuition reimbursement program. We're getting ready to develop a vacation buyback program. It's part of my tasks for next year, so find the time to do that. And then we have commuter life insurance. We have several discount programs that are through the city. We have a legal shield is offered. We have a gym program going the extra mile, and you can get a small gift that's worth probably $5. But if somebody sees you doing something good, they just give you this card that says, hey, I think you're going that extra mile. Good job. And you can pick out a gift that you want to have, and it's a great program. We also have a leave share program, and then directors have a cell phone allowance since they're on call all the time. And then next year we plan on implementing a car allowance for all directors if they want it. We currently have that program in place, but only some of the directors have it, and we wanted to make sure that it was in the budget that it was available to all directors. So health insurance, this is always a big discussion because it goes up every year, and this year's no different. It's going to go up to 4 to 9% based on the plan. So there are several different plans that the city has that you can choose from, and currently we have 4 plans. Next year there's going to be 5, might be 6 plans. 5. Next year, okay, I was close. And the city has always covered the employee's cost. So we have always paid for the employee to be on the health insurance, whatever that cost is, and the employees always have paid a percentage of their dependent coverage. So the costs are going up next year, and as a benefit, we decided to not increase the employee cost. So they will pay the same amount next year that they're paying this year, which is a small increase to the city. It's not a large amount of money. I think it was $200,000 for the year for us to, in that change, to cover that a little bit of additional cost for the dependents. You can see that the rates have always gone up from 2019 to 2023. They're probably not gonna stop going up because health insurance is expensive. We also had some other plan changes. We added a $1,200 deductible plan, higher deductible, lower cost to the employee for their dependent coverage because it's a higher deductible. And that's for people who can't qualify for a health savings account. There are certain instances where you can't be on that high deductible plan and go and have an HSA or a health savings account. So that's for those people who want to pay a little bit less, but don't mind having a little bit larger deductible. The core plan is the plan that we have always, that's always been free to the employee. It's the one that's increasing the most. So what we decided this year is if people want to stay on the core plan, we're gonna make them make up that cost difference as the employee because it's the one that increased 9%. Everything else only increased 4%, and it's kind of steering them away from using the core plan a little bit because there is a copay plan that is just as, it's the same deductible, it's the same benefit, and it's just copays. And so it's kind of like they've spread it out. We now have 6 plans to choose from, so we made one like a premium plan. You're paying a little bit extra for going on that plan.
Kirsten, it's not the same deductible.
It's not the same deductible. I was wrong. Sorry. So $750 instead of 500. For the core plan. Yeah, for the 500 for the core plan, $750 for the copay plan.
So there is still 5 plans that are free to
Yes.
employees.
Only the one plan costs an employee. So there are also some other changes. They're adding a participant advocate team to help answer any questions so that if you have any problems, you can call Kairos directly instead of the health insurance provider and get assistance in dealing with the health insurance provider, which is United Healthcare. And then our VSP, our vision program, is actually decreasing by 5% for next year. So these are the rates. I just put them all in there. And you can see that the cost for the employee versus the employer and how much we pay for that. So our retirement, ASRS and PSPRS, ASRS is decreasing. First time ever since I've been here, it's decreased. It's going from 12.41% to 12.17%. And public safety, depending on which tier you're on, it's decreasing because we fully funded that unfunded liability. People in tier 2, their rate is now going to be the same or closer to the tier 1 rate. They were paying a little bit more before. It was something that was already planned through PSPRS, but since a lot of organizations funded their unfunded liability, they decided to do that this year. So their plan will go down a little bit. I think it's currently 11.65%, and it's going down to 7.65 for PD and 8% for fire. So it's decreasing a few percentage points. All good news for our employees this year. So our capital and our carryover projects, our capital always looks like such a huge number. Most of it's in water and wastewater. Basically, the general fund, there was $5.8 million in requests for capital, and we plan on funding $4.6 million. Part of that, $1 million of that is a carryover for the ladder truck, another truck for the fire department, and several other projects in different departments, including Parks and Rec at $814. That's the splash pad and the other equipment at the rec center that we're updating. I think that there's quite a few things. I didn't list out everything. You do have a list of all the capital that's been approved with your packet and the request and what wasn't approved. There are some things that we'll probably change between now and the tentative. I actually know of several. We had the splash pad, they got a new cost estimate. It's going to be a little higher than we anticipated, about $100,000. And then 2 of the grants that the police department was trying to get, they can't get, so we're gonna fund the capital without the revenue. And then they got another grant, because we list all grants in the capital, it's usually big equipment. They got a grant for $60,000 for UTV. What else? Oh, and then Pima Street Bridge grew a little bit in cost, so that's in this budget as well. So as you can see, the total requests were 58 million for capital items, and we're gonna spend 50 million, and the majority is in water and wastewater.
And I did have a question when you said that we'll see some changes before you bring back the tentative. Because if I understood correctly, we have about $500,000 extra.
Yes.
Any thoughts on where those funds will be allocated?
No, probably reserves. We'll start to absorb some of the changes we already know about. For example, the $100,000 for the splash pad. So now we're down to 400. I think the PD changes already were less than 100. I mean, they were small. So probably reserves at this point. But usually as we get closer and department directors begin to understand that their projects might be approved, we start to get a little more refined numbers sometimes. So I don't know of anything directly how that'll be spent. I mean, if you guys have an idea, we'd be happy to work on that. But my guess is right back into reserves. The other thing that'll probably change, and I don't know that she knows this, found out today, we may have to pay for the Pima Bridge now in this FY. Oh, you did know that, okay. So it may not even be in next year's budget. We got to figure out how that works out going forward. So there's those last few minute things that'll be changed, but no, I guess a long answer I don't know about 400,000 of it, 350 of it.
It probably will most likely end up in reserves.
Okay.
Do we need it because of the wastewater issue?
If we do, we'll come to you much later on that. So we would never use general fund money for any of the utilities until we were like there. And utilities should pay for themselves. That's an enterprise fund. So the answer is no. But if it were to ever to occur, that would come back specifically for council's authority to move something from one fund to another like that. I have the authority to move things around in department-wise, but I believe to move things from one fund to another fund takes council's approval.
And there were some things, I know when you and I met, and I know you met with other council members, there were some items that we're just designing this year, but there may be an opportunity to go ahead and build those out as well.
Absolutely. We'll just kind of see how long it takes us to build it. And again, you'll have, if I remember the number correctly, 8 million in undesignated reserves in your budget. And so as we're ready to begin building those, we'll come back to council for authorization to move that money out of the undesignated reserves into whatever project may occur. You know, remember 3 years ago and for every year before that, your undesignated reserves was $40,000, $60,000, $80,000. And now we're up in the, $8 million range. So it does create some flexibility for mid-year projects to come to fruition. For me, the big ones is roads, because in addition to Main Street, we're also designing 6th Street. I believe between the rec center and 89A is on the list to design. So let's say that were to come back, we might be able to start on that. I know that James is working on some water projects, some stormwater projects. So if we were able to get those, the studies finished and have an actual project, we might come back and spend some money on that. The other thing this really does is gives us some flexibility when it comes time to decide what to do about paying for the build out of the new city hall. We may need to borrow less. There's lots of different things we can do when that time comes. We're in negotiations right now with Last Architect for scope and fees, and so we'll be wrapping that up. David and team, David and Jeff are working on the scope for the CMAR, so that'll be going out before you know it. And so I don't expect to have a price estimate for a little while. Probably later this year at best is to have a good number to tell council. So we have those reserves that we could move in to start paying for some of that. When we interviewed the architects, every firm said buy the big stuff early. So there might be some stuff that we come in and ask to spend cash on. So we've got lots of different things, I think, on the horizon that we might be able to do. We've got the 89A project that ADOT seems to be struggling with, that we might have to do something with. And then Main Street could be very expensive depending on what we do, and how many sidewalks and ADA sidewalks we have to do. And of course, the council could always direct us to do additional pavement preservation as we go through that. So lots of options, a very flexible budget for council to decide.
Great.
Questions? See, I went through 30 slides really fast.
That was fast. Council, do we have any questions? I know we asked.
Unless you have
Yes,
something you
ma'am.
want me to change.
Well, then, let me ask my question. Well, just go ahead. I'll find out.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, it's up to you to who goes next.
Do any other council members have any questions?
I don't have questions. Ms. Lennon answered them all along. I did want to thank, while she's preparing her list over here, I did want to thank Kirsten, Helen, and then also Ron, just for putting in the time, meeting at least with me beforehand, going over the information so it's not such a sticker shock. And really just explaining the need, and I do appreciate the information. I think this looks good for the proposed, and I look forward to some of the changes that you outlined for the tentative and those discussions moving forward. It's a nice, refreshing problem to have where we have more money anticipated for the tentative than we'd planned for before. So it's kind of new times, and I'm looking forward to all the good projects that we're working on this next fiscal year. So, are you ready yet?
I agree with what she said. The only really question that I remember that I had, which is really not a big deal, is I couldn't find on here where there was anything for the furniture in the new building.
Oh, it's all part of the cost of the construction. It's all lumped into one lump sum.
Are we replacing pretty much everything, or?
Yes, ma'am. The plan is not to bring any old furniture into the new building, but that's a decision point for council at some point. So the number you have in there is not the number. I just want to make that very clear. That's a starting spot. If we had our way, it'd be much, much lower, but I just don't know what it is. But we had to put something just in case we started spending, or just in case council decided to bond. So since you brought it up, Kirsten, correct me as I go along here, but the way I understand our bonding is we currently have a $17, $19 million bond for the rec center, library, and those things. So that was borrowed many, many years ago. That is paid off in 2027.
July of 2027.
So in a few years, that'll be paid off. I expect, Kirsten thinks it'll be higher, but I expect the number that we'll need to bond to be much lower than that. And so there may be an overlap of 2 years, because by the time our first payment is due, and then after that, the bond, if we need one, and if we go that direction, would just replace the reoccurring expense we've had for the riverfront and library and those things. So while there will be a 2-year increase, or maybe a 3-year max increase, actually 23, no more than 3-year overlap, it will then just fit right in. It'll be less. We borrowed that amount of money at a little less than 3%, I believe. No?
It started at 5, we got it back down to 2.75% recently.
So if you're, for the TV folks, he said it started at a 5% borrowing rate, and they got it down to 2.75 when they refinanced it. So I hope that if we borrow, it'll be less than 3%. Our ratings are very good right now. Interest rates are going up, so we don't know. But I'm not asking council to borrow yet, because I don't know the number, and I don't want to borrow what we don't need. So it's kind of I don't want to get the cart before the horse, even though it might be better to borrow now, but I don't want to borrow less than we need, and I definitely don't want to borrow more than we need. So until I get those numbers from the architects and the CMAR, I don't feel comfortable asking council on how to move forward.
Sure.
And we did pay cash for the purchase of the building, and will not include that in the bond, because we covered that without a problem this current fiscal year. And still have a large reserve to carry over, so.
Have we completed all of the repairs on that building?
Councilmember Hulse, on the new City Hall, we've repaired nothing. So the list of injuries, the list of needed repairs was given to the architect, and they know that they have to include it in their design fixture. One of the issues that that building has is sunlight into the interior, so daylighting of the building, and so how they repair the roof might play into effect about the lighting of the building. So there are lots of issues that need to be considered before we just start fixing things. But they're aware, all the architects took it into consideration and thought the research that we did kind of fits what they expected with that building. And our price estimates include the new roof and other structural issues that might need to be fixed, which are quite few compared to the building in the back originally.
This, does this need to be in the budget if I bring something up?
Just, this is your time, absolutely.
Just say anything I want?
Yeah, say anything.
This
Okay.
is a wish list.
Okay, wait, maybe not anything.
No, this is
I've
good
got a
news.
pin.
Please tell me who we thank, again, for having ADOT fix the road between 260 and in front of the Shell station.
So if Mr. Bramble would stand up in the back and we'd all give him a round of applause. No. So, no, I know. So two things. First of all, it was they had surplus for projects, and they knew that this was a high need. And so they brought in a temporary fix. It could even start to fall apart before we get the real fix. So it's temporary. It's because, and he's not going to think this, but I personally think it's because David and James have been in constant contact with the northern ADOT region and tell them how bad that road is. And so I think it's because of their efforts that is on the top of their to-do list. So we do need to thank ADOT for having extra money and resources to be able to spend a little bit. So he's not going to take any credit, but I really think it's the effort of our staff working with ADOT. But ADOT is the one who did it on their own, knowing how bad the problem was. So thank you to the northern region ADOT. Northern region? Yep.
And Ron, I'll pass, and I know James and David will probably pass that on as well during our Verde Valley Transportation Planning Organization meetings that we have. I also know we did have quite a few community outreach calls to ADOT as well. That was a big concern in that area, so. But thank you. I didn't want to take away from staff. That was wonderful. I noticed it earlier this week. I thought, something's wrong here. It's quiet. I'm not shaking around in my car, so it was wonderful.
Yeah, normally we know about projects are coming, and even James and David were surprised by the note from Sandra saying that we got a press release from ADOT. So pleasantly surprised. So feel free, guys, up there that are listening in ADOT, to surprise us anytime you want. Throw some extra stuff our way.
Any other questions from council? All right, well, I had sticker shock myself when I first saw this, and the shock really came in that we were putting so much money in reserves and our revenue was up so much. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like this. So, but since we've had this council meeting, I've counted, I think, no fewer than 6 tour buses passing on Main Street behind us. So times are good in Cottonwood and here in the Verde Valley. I think that's obviously represented in our budget. And I think what's important about this budget is equally shared, you know, the boon that we have, you know, it's equally shared across our employees who certainly deserve it, but it's also shared to our community and some of the infrastructure projects that we're going to be able to tackle with this budget. I think we're going to see a lot of great projects happen in the next couple of years, and our community is just going to look much better for it. So good job, Ron. Good job, council, for really just holding the line for so many years. I mean, our reserves they just really look good, more than they've, I think, ever looked, at least as long as I've been here. So thanks to council for that. And Rudy, thanks for mentoring Kirsten. Kirsten, great job. Helen, thank you so much. I know you're behind the scenes, but I know that most of the smoke is coming out of your ears when you're putting this document together. So thank you so much. It's much, much appreciated.
Mr. Mayor, before you wrap up with your thank yous, I also want to say thank you, but I'll start by saying thank you to council. The 3.5 years I've been here, direction is clear. Spend wisely, save as much money as possible, and do the right thing for our community. And I think this budget does that. I think not only do we save money, whether it be the designated or undesignated reserves or the money put into HERF, you guys have prioritized infrastructure. So we are dedicating almost $5 million just for general road stuff, add another several $100,000 for sidewalks, add another several $100,000 for parks and recreation into improving our community. So that's under your guys' directions and leadership, and some hard decisions that were made even before I got here with the tax increase and other decisions. So this is a reflection of direction provided by council. And then I'd be remiss not to thank my staff. So they have been working very hard for 3.5 years. I'm sure they worked hard before I got here, but some of them have really stepped up in the last 3.5 years. They pinch pennies. They watch where we spend our money. They do their best not to waste money. They work hard to be proactive to reduce costs in the future. They don't ask for staff they don't need. They watch their overtime budgets. They do all the things that I ask them to do. And I know that I have been a burden to many of the employees, asking them to work even extra hard and give 100%. We received a beautiful thank you letter from Deb Hunsinger from the Verde Valley Wine Festival and listed all the efforts. That's just an example of a weekend for our team, whether it be Public Works or utilities or our police department working together. They have stepped up. And so I'm very proud of not only my directors for carrying forth your vision, but for the employees who have really made this happen. So kudos to, of course, Kirsten and Helen for the budget and all the department directors, but also to our staff who've really stepped up to make this community what it is.
I too want to thank you and all of them for all the work that they put into getting us numbers and making sure that they do stay on budget, because they work really hard at it.
Not to turn this into a love fest, but let's not forget who's at the helm. So thank you, Ron.
All right, so tentative one, what can we expect?
Tentative budget will be June 20th.
Okay.
We'll bring it back on June 20th. Of course, that will be a public meeting with an open for public comment. And then also the final budget will be back on July 18th.
Okay.
So we will see you in about a month.
And we have a budget road show too, don't we?
We have a
do.
budget roadshow.
So we have the 24th, which is Town Hall, which Marianne and team helped set up. We also are going to the Crestview HOA. We have, I heard from Lions last night. The Lions Club is trying to get us on their agenda. Ryan, you were, Rudy, you were talking to someone? And Rotary Club we'll get to. So, and I went to the Hotelers TAC meeting with Tricia the other day, and I told them, hey, if there's anybody that wants to host, we'd be happy to. I know the chamber usually asks us to come out, so I have reached out to Christian, so he may be inviting us back to a chamber board meeting. But if there's any group that wants to hear from us, we take this road on the show. Employee meetings start. Yeah, that. Sorry. Now who's talking fast, Kirsten? So one of the programs we're adding next year is public speaking class that I'm providing for all the directors, and I'll be first. But the employee show starts tomorrow and then Monday, whatever that is, the employee feedback. Normally we meet with them earlier in the process, but given the sticker shock with the COLAs and the merits and new employees, I really wanted to make sure we had support of council before I started making any announcements about compensation. So that'll start tomorrow as well.
And I'm sure you'll have us on Inside Cottonwood.
Yep, Inside Cottonwood will probably be next, so stay tuned for that.
Great. All right, good work, everyone. And if there's nothing else, I would motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Henry seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks.
There's still pizza in the back, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen.